The wind carried the sound of quiet pain across the frozen valley. The ground was covered in white snow mixed with black ash. Burned metal pieces and half-destroyed ships lay scattered everywhere. The war had ended 2 days ago, but not everyone had left the battlefield. Hidden under the remains of an old transport vehicle, 25 human soldiers were still alive, waiting for help that never came. Their radios were dead. Their food and water were almost gone. The cold was killing them faster than their wounds. Hanno, the young captain of the group, tried to keep his eyes open. His leg was broken, and his breath came out in small clouds of white mist. "Stay awake," he whispered to his team. "Help will come." But deep down, he was no longer sure. The command ship had stopped responding. The rescue drones never arrived. He looked around at his team, Ji-won, Dae-hoon, Eun-woo, So-min, and many others. Some were injured, some silent. They were soldiers from Earth, sent to fight on this distant frozen world called Althera. Far above the storm clouds, something moved. It was not human, and it was not a machine. It was small for a dragon, only the size of a war jeep, with white scales that looked like carved ice. Its wings shimmered in the sunlight. This was an albino dwarf dragon, one of the rarest creatures on Althera. It had survived the bombardments and hid in the high mountains, watching the war from afar. The dragon had no name. It had no tribe. The others of its kind had been killed or captured long ago. It was alone. As it flew over the silent battlefield, it heard faint sounds, human voices, soft and broken. The dragon's hearing was sharp. It followed the echo through the icy wind until it saw the half-buried vehicle. The smell of blood and smoke filled the air. The dragon landed quietly, folding its pale wings. Its red eyes glowed faintly as it looked inside the wreckage. Hanno heard the sound first, the crunch of snow, the slow exhale of a living creature. He reached for his weapon, but his hand was too weak. Ji-won, the medic, looked out through a broken window and froze. "Captain," he whispered, "something's out there." The soldiers tensed. They expected an enemy patrol, or one of the local beasts that hunted the dead. What they saw instead made them forget their fear. The creature outside was beautiful and strange. Its scales shone white as moonlight. Steam came from its nostrils as it breathed. Its wings folded tightly against its sides. For a moment, no one moved. The dragon tilted its head, studying the humans. It could smell their pain, their exhaustion. They were not a threat. They were dying. Dae-hoon raised his weapon weakly, his voice trembling. It's one of them," he said. "The enemy used these things in the first attacks." Hanno lifted his hand. "No shooting," he said softly. "Look at it. It's not attacking." The dragon stepped closer. It sniffed the air and let out a low growl, not of anger but curiosity. Ji-won reached for a flare stick and held it out, its red light glowing weakly. The dragon blinked, tilting its head as if trying to understand. It had seen humans before, from a distance, during the war, but these were not soldiers now. They were weak, helpless, cold. Something in its ancient instincts stirred. It remembered the time when dragons and humans had lived side by side on this planet, before humans turned to war and machines. The dragon moved around the wreckage, stopping near a small vent hole. It breathed out gently, and a wave of warm air entered the broken transport. The soldiers felt the sudden change. The frost on their armor began to melt. "It's warming us," So-min whispered. "Why would it do that?" No one answered. They only watched, afraid to believe what they were seeing. Hours passed. The storm outside grew stronger, but inside the wreckage, it stayed warm. The dragon had dug a shallow pit and rested nearby, keeping its body close to humans. Whenever it sensed her shivering, it released another breath of warm air. Hanno, weak but awake, whispered to Ji-won, "We can't stay here. If we move when the storm ends, maybe we can reach the beacon tower." Ji-won nodded, but looked at the dragon. "Will it let us leave?" Hanno didn't know. When morning came, the storm stopped. The sky turned pale blue, and sunlight touched the snowy hills. The dragon stood up, shaking off the snow from its wings. It looked toward the mountains in the north. There was movement there, machines. The enemy was returning to clean the battlefield. The dragon growled softly. It sensed danger. Hanno saw it too. He tried to get the others ready, but most were too weak to move. The dragon turned his head toward them and let out a low hum, almost like a signal. Then it stepped aside and spread its wings. It wanted them to follow. Is it trying to lead us? So men asked. Maybe, Hanno said. He couldn't explain why, but he felt a strange trust. We follow it, he decided. If it wanted to kill us, we'd already be dead. With great effort, the soldiers helped each other out of the wreckage. They moved slowly through the snow, following the white dragon. It stayed close, checking behind now and then. When one soldier fell, the dragon stopped and waited. Its movements were careful, almost protective. After 2 hours of walking, they reached a frozen cave near the cliffs. The dragon entered first, making a low sound from its throat. Inside the cave, the air was warm and dry. There were marks on the walls, ancient runes, faded with time. The soldiers took shelter, grateful and confused. This cave, Juan said, looks like someone used it before. The dragon lay near the entrance, watching the humans rest. Its eyes half closed, but it stayed alert. As night came, Hanno looked at the dragon again. Why are you helping us? He said quietly, though he knew it couldn't answer. The dragon moved its head slightly and gave a small rumble, like a soft growl mixed with breath. Hanno didn't understand, but he felt the meaning. It didn't want them to die. For the first time since the war began, the soldiers felt safe. The dragon had become their guardian, silent and mysterious. Outside, enemy drones searched the land, scanning for survivors, but they never found the cave. The dragon's white scales blended with the snow perfectly, hiding them from sight. Before Hanno fell asleep, he looked at his team, 25 tired, wounded humans who had been left to die. Now, somehow, they had a protector. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but deep inside, he felt something new. Hope. Far outside the cave in the silent night, the dragon raised its head. It watched the sky filled with distant stars, remembering a time when dragons ruled freely and humans were friends, not enemies. A single sound escaped its throat, a quiet, almost sad song that echoed softly across the frozen valley. It would protect these humans, even if it cost its life. The sun rose slowly above the frozen mountains, shining weak light through the thin clouds. Inside the cave, the soldiers woke up one by one. For a few seconds, they forgot where they were. The air was warm, and the sound of wind outside was soft. Then they saw the white dragon resting near the entrance, its wings folded like blankets of ice. The memories came back, the crash, the cold, and the strange creature that had saved them. Hanno sat up carefully, his legs still wrapped in cloth. He looked around at his team. Ji-won was checking the wounded. Dae-hoon and So-min were trying to make a small fire with broken tech parts. The dragon opened one red eye and watched them without moving. It looked peaceful but alert. We need a plan, Hanno said in a low voice. We can't stay here forever. The enemy will search again. We need food and water, and we need to reach the communication tower. Ji-won nodded. But, Captain, the tower is 20 kilometers away. Half of us can barely walk. Hanno looked at his leg, then at the others. Then we move slow, he said, or we die here. Outside, snow started to fall again, light and gentle. The dragon stood up and walked toward the mouth of the cave. It looked out over the white land and sniffed the air. Then it turned back and looked at Hanno, letting out a deep, short breath. Hanno stared back. Somehow, he understood that the dragon wanted them to wait. A few minutes later, the dragon spread its wings and flew away, vanishing into the snowstorm. The soldiers watched in silence. Did it leave us? Dae-hoon asked quietly. No one answered. They sat close to the weak fire, feeling the cold creeping back. Hours passed. The storm grew heavier, and the cave grew darker. Some soldiers began to lose hope again. But when the sun started to fall behind the mountains, a shadow appeared in the sky. The dragon returned. In its claws, it carried something, a frozen beast, large and heavy. It landed outside the cave, dropped the animal, and looked at the humans. Steam rose from its nostrils as it let out a loud snort, shaking snow from its wings. Ji-Won's eyes widened. "It brought food," he said softly. The dragon used its sharp claws to tear open the creature's thick hide. The smell of raw meat filled the air. The soldiers stared, hungry but unsure. The dragon stepped aside and made a low growl, as if telling them to eat. Hanul nodded slowly. "Cook it," he said. "We'll take the risk." They used the last of their energy cells to heat the metal plate. The meat sizzled, and the smell made everyone's stomach growl. For the first time in days, they ate until they felt full. The dragon watched quietly from the cave's entrance. After the meal, it lowered its head and closed its eyes. Its breathing was slow and calm, like a guardian that had finished its duty. Later that night, Hanul sat near the fire with Ji-Won. The others were sleeping. "Do you think it understands us?" Ji-Won asked. "Maybe not our words," Hanul said, "but maybe it understands something deeper. It could have killed us any time, but it didn't." The next morning, they prepared to move. The storm had stopped, and the air was clear. The dragon walked outside first, sniffing the wind again. Hanul looked at his team. "We follow it again. It knows this land." They packed what little they had and began walking behind the dragon. It moved slowly, matching their weak pace. The journey was hard. The snow reached their knees and the cold bit their faces. Several times they stopped to rest, but the dragon stayed near, waiting each time. It would walk ahead, then return, as if checking the path. Ji-Won whispered to So-Min, "It's guiding us like a leader." So-Min nodded. Maybe it sees us as part of its pack. As they walked, Hanul noticed strange things. The dragon avoided open ground and led them through narrow canyons and over frozen rivers that looked solid. Once, when they were about to cross a valley, the dragon suddenly growled and blocked their path. Seconds later, enemy drones flew overhead, their red lights scanning the ground. The soldiers froze, pressing themselves against the ice. The dragon spread its wings over them, blending perfectly with the snow. The drones passed without noticing. When they were gone, the dragon looked at them with a sharp gaze, as if to say, "Be careful." They traveled all day and reached a deep forest of icy trees by nightfall. The dragon stopped there, finding a place for them to rest. The forest was quiet, the air filled with tiny glowing insects that floated like stars. Hanul sat near the dragon, looking up at the strange lights. "You saved us again," he said softly. The dragon tilted its head and gave a soft, throaty sound. Its eyes looked almost gentle. Ji-Won came over and said, "Captain, the communication tower should be close, maybe 10 kilometers east." Hanul nodded. "We'll move at dawn." Then he looked at the dragon. "But what about it? Will it stay with us?" No one knew the answer. That night, Hanul couldn't sleep. He kept watching the dragon. It seemed to be listening to something far away. Its body was still, but its eyes were open. Then suddenly, it lifted its head sharply and growled. The soldiers woke up in fear. "What's happening?" So-Min whispered. The dragon looked toward the west, its wings twitching. Hanul grabbed his rifle and limped outside the small shelter. In the distance, bright lights flashed, searchlights. The enemy had found their trail. The dragon let out a deep roar, the sound shaking the forest. The soldiers prepared their weapons, though they knew they were too weak to fight. "We can't run fast enough," Ji-Won said, panic in his voice. Hanul looked at the dragon. It turned toward him, eyes burning red in the dark. For a moment, it seemed to understand their fear. Then it spread its wings and leapt into the air. The wind from its flight knocked snow off the trees. The soldiers watched as it soared toward the lights, its white body shining against the dark sky. Moments later, the sound of explosions filled the air. Blue fire flashed through the trees. The dragon was fighting. Hanul could only watch, feeling helpless. The sky burned with light and smoke. Roars and mechanical screams echoed. Then the sound faded. The forest fell silent again. They waited, hearts pounding. Finally, a white shape appeared to the falling snow. The dragon was returning. Its wings were torn and black marks covered its scales, but it was alive. The soldiers ran to it as it landed heavily on the ground. Ji-Won tried to check its wounds, but the dragon moved its head away gently. It lay down, breathing hard. Its blood was pale blue and steamed on the cold ground. Hanul knelt beside it. "You saved us again," he said softly. "Thank you." The dragon blinked slowly. It let out a weak growl and looked at the soldiers, one by one. Then it turned its gaze toward the east, where the tower stood beyond the horizon. Hanul understood. "You want us to go," he whispered. "You'll follow later." The dragon made no sound but kept its eyes on him. By morning, the dragon had recovered enough to move again. It stood tall, shaking off the frost. The soldiers gathered their gear, ready to walk. Before they left, Hanul looked back. The dragon looked down at him for a long moment, then lowered its head slightly, as if bowing. Hanul saluted. "We'll make it," he said. "Because of you." They began their journey again, following the faint sunlight that led east. Behind them, the dragon walked slowly, watching over them like a silent guardian. None of them spoke. The dragon soared into the dark sky, its pale wings cutting through the smoke and snow. The soldiers below could hear the echo of its roar fading into the distance. Hanul stood still, his rifle in his hands, but his heart pounding. The forest trembled as light from the explosions flashed behind the hills. They knew the dragon was fighting again, alone. Minutes passed. The sky glowed red, then purple, then went dark again. The sound of battle faded until there was only the soft whisper of the wind. Jiwon looked at Hanul. "Do you think it survived?" he asked. Hanul didn't answer. He looked toward the west where the dragon had flown. "We move east," he said at last. That's what it wanted. They began to walk through the icy forest. The snow was deep and their bodies were weak. Daehoon helped Somin, who could hardly lift her legs. The trees groaned with the weight of ice. Every sound seemed louder than it was. The silence around them felt heavy, almost watching them. But no drones came and no lights appeared. It was as if the dragon's battle had drawn all attention away. Hours passed. The soldiers moved slower and slower. Ji-won's fingers were bleeding from a cold, but he kept holding the small scanner that showed the direction of the tower. 5 kilometers, he whispered. Maybe less. Hanul nodded, forcing a smile. "We'll make it," he said, though his voice was weak. Deep down, he wasn't sure. As the sun rose, a pale glow spread across the snow. In the distance, they saw the outline of the communication tower, a tall, broken structure standing against the white mountains. It looked almost unreachable, but it was their only hope. They moved toward it, step by step. Then a sound came from behind. A heavy, dragging noise, followed by a soft growl. The soldiers froze. Ji-won turned slowly and his eyes widened. The dragon was there. It was alive, but badly wounded. One wing was torn. Its white scales burned black in places. Steam rose from its body as it walked toward them, leaving a trail of blue blood in the snow. Somin covered her mouth to stop herself from crying. "It came back," she whispered. The dragon stopped near Hanul and lowered its head. Its eyes were dim but calm. Hanul stepped forward and placed his hand gently on its cold scales. "You shouldn't have fought for us," he said softly. The dragon made a small sound, like a sigh. It seemed to understand the words. Then it turned its head toward the tower again. Hanul followed its gaze and nodded. "You want us to finish this," he said. "We will." The group continued their journey, the dragon limping beside them. Whenever one of the soldiers fell, it stopped and waited, lowering its neck to shield them from the wind. It was slower now, but still strong enough to protect. The soldiers no longer felt alone. They were part of something larger than the war, something older and deeper. When they reached the edge of the valley, they saw movement near the tower. Enemy machines were guarding it, tall mechanical walkers with glowing red eyes and long guns. There were too many to fight. Hanul's heart sank. "We can't get through," Ji-won said quietly. "Not with our weapons." The soldiers crouched behind a fallen ice ridge, watching the machines patrol. The dragon looked at them, then at the tower. It let out a soft growl, deep and low. Hanul shook his head. "No," he whispered. "You can't fight again. You'll die." But the dragon didn't move away. It looked straight into his eyes, and in that silent gaze, Han felt the message. It was ready to sacrifice itself for them. Ji-Won's eyes filled with tears. Captain, if it distracts them, we can reach the tower and send the signal. We can call for rescue. Han gritted his teeth. And it dies. If it doesn't, Ji-Won said softly, we all die. The dragon stepped forward, raising its head high. Its wings spread wide despite the damage. The morning light shone through its pale skin like glass. Then it roared, a sound so powerful it shook the valley. The machines turned immediately, their sensors flashing red. The dragon leapt into the air, flying straight toward them. The sky filled with light. Blue fire burst from its mouth, striking the machines and melting the snow around them. The enemy fired back, beams of red energy cutting through the air. The dragon dodged one, then another, but one beam struck its side. It screamed, spinning through the air before crashing into the snow. But it didn't stop. It dragged itself forward, breathing fire again. The machines turned all their weapons toward it. The battle was chaos. Han shouted, "Move! Now!" The soldiers ran through the smoke and snow, heading straight for the tower. They climbed over broken metal and burning wrecks. Ji-Won carried the signal device in his pack. The dragon kept fighting, keeping the machines away. Each roar, each burst of flame, gave the soldiers more time. When they reached the base of the tower, Han and Dae-hoon helped Ji-Won climb up the side ladder. The structure shook with every explosion. Just a few minutes. Ji-Won yelled. He connected the device to the tower's old console, typing with frozen fingers. It's working. The signal is sending. A bright light flashed from the tower's tip, shooting into the sky. Hope, finally, was rising. But below, the sound of battle was ending. The dragon lay among the burning machines, its wings spread and body still. Smoke rose from its wounds. The soldiers climbed down and ran toward it. "No," Han said, his voice breaking. "Not like this." They gathered around the dragon. Its breathing was shallow. Its red eyes looked at them one last time. Han knelt beside its head. "We're alive because of you," he whispered. "You didn't just save soldiers. You saved humans." The dragon blinked slowly, then looked at the sky. A faint rumble echoed from above, the sound of rescue ships approaching. It had succeeded. The dragon let out one last breath, warm and soft. Its eyes slowly closed and its body began to fade. The white scales turned to crystal, shining in the sunlight. The soldier stepped back as the dragon's body dissolved into mist, rising like snowflakes into the air. It was gone. No one spoke. The wind blew gently over the battlefield. Ji-Won wiped his face with shaking hands. "It was more human than we were," he said quietly. Han looked up at the sky, where the signal light still burned. "Maybe it remembered what we forgot," he said. "That life is not just about fighting." When the rescue ships arrived, they found 25 survivors standing beside a field of broken machines and melting ice. None of them spoke about the dragon at first. The military called it an unknown factor. But in their hearts, they knew the truth. They had been saved by a creature that should have been their enemy. As the ship lifted off, Han looked out the window. The valley below was silent again, white and endless. For a moment, he thought he saw something in the clouds, a faint shape of wings glowing in the light. He smiled. "Rest well, friend," he whispered. Far below, the wind carried a soft, distant sound, a dragon's roar fading into the sky, peaceful and eternal. The rescue ship flew through the thick clouds above Althra, carrying the 25 soldiers away from the frozen battlefield. Inside the cabin, silence filled the air. No one spoke. Their faces were pale and tired, eyes lost in the memories of what they had seen. The hum of the engines was the only sound. Han sat near the window, staring at the fading landscape below. Snow and smoke covered everything, but his mind was still with the dragon. Ji-Won sat beside him, holding a small metal tag between his fingers. It was part of the dragon's armor, something it had worn when it fought. "They'll never believe this," Ji-Won said softly. "No one will believe what it did." Han didn't look away from the window. We don't need them to believe, he said. We just need to remember. The ship landed hours later at a military base orbiting the planet. Doctors rushed to treat the wounded, and officers came to question the survivors. They wanted reports, details, proof of what had happened. But every time a dragon's name came up, they dismissed it as shock or imagination. No creature could survive those conditions, one officer said. It's a myth. Hanul stayed quiet. He had no energy to argue. Days passed. The soldiers were separated, sent for treatment and rest. Some were given medals. Some were reassigned. But none of them felt like heroes. They had seen something that changed them. Ji-won visited Hanul in the recovery ward one evening. The command says we'll be sent back to Earth in a week, he said. They still won't talk about the dragon. Hanul smiled faintly. Maybe that's for the best. But deep inside, Hanul felt something pulling him back. Every night he dreamed of the white dragon. Its red eyes, its wings cutting through the storm, its warmth in the cave. It was more than an animal. It was a symbol of something pure that had survived in the middle of war. He couldn't forget it. One night, when the base lights dimmed, Hanul stood up quietly and left his room. He walked through the silent hallways until he reached the observation deck. The stars outside glowed softly, and the planet Althra floated below like a white marble. Ji-won found him there, standing still, lost in thought. You're thinking about going back, Ji-won said. Hanul nodded. There's something unfinished, he whispered. I can't explain it. A week later, when the evacuation ships prepared to leave for Earth, Hanul made his choice. He and Ji-won stayed behind, volunteering for a mission to recover remaining data from Althra's surface. The commanders thought they were brave. Only the two of them knew the truth. They wanted to find the dragon's resting place. The descent was quiet. Their small craft cut through the clouds, landing near the frozen valley where it had all ended. The machines were gone, melted into the snow. The battlefield was silent again. They walked slowly through the white waste, their boots crunching on the ice. The wind howled through the empty plains. After hours of searching, they reached the place where the dragon had fallen. The snow was disturbed there, forming strange crystal patterns that shimmered in the light. Hanul knelt down and brushed away the frost. Beneath it, something glowed faintly, shards of transparent scale, shining like glass. Ji-won crouched beside him. It's still here, he whispered. It didn't vanish completely. Hanul touched the crystal. It was cold, but he felt warmth under the surface, like a heartbeat. The glow pulsed once, then again. Suddenly, a soft light rose from the ground, spreading through the valley. The snow lifted into the air, swirling around them. The air hummed with energy. Ji-won stepped back, eyes wide. Captain, what is this? From the center of the glow, a shape began to form, white mist gathering and folding, taking the shape of wings, a body, a head. Slowly, the albino dwarf dragon appeared again, made of light and frost. It looked almost transparent, like a spirit. Its eyes glowed softly red. Hanul froze, his breath caught. You're alive, he whispered. The dragon looked at them silently. It didn't move closer, but its gaze was gentle. Its wings spread slowly, and a wave of warmth filled the valley. The soldiers felt it deep in their bones. It was not a ghost of anger or pain. It was peace. Ji-won's voice trembled. It's not dead. It became something else. Hanul nodded. It's part of this planet now. The dragon tilted its head and made a low, soothing sound, like a melody carried by the wind. The snow around them glowed brighter. Images appeared in the air, memories of what had happened. The dragon's flight, its battles, the soldiers walking through storms. It was showing them everything, as if reminding them that life was not about hate or fear, but about connection. Then the images faded, and the dragon looked at Hanul one last time. It lowered its head slowly, as it had done before. Hanul stepped forward and placed his hand on the air where its scales should have been. He felt warmed again, stronger this time, filling his heart. Thank you, he said quietly. You gave us hope. The dragon's body began to fade back into light, its wings dissolving into snow. The last thing they saw were its eyes, glowing softly, like two stars in the mist. Then the light was gone. The valley was silent again, but the air felt alive. Ji-won looked at Han-no. What now? Han-no stood up slowly, looking at the horizon. We go home, he said, but not as soldiers, as witnesses. He took one last look at the spot where the dragon had been. It trusted us to remember. They collected the crystal shards and placed them in a container. When they returned to the ship, the scanner showed strange readings, energy signatures that didn't match any known element. It was as if the planet itself had changed. The base scientists would study for years, never understanding what it truly was. But Han-no and Ji-won didn't tell them everything. Some things were meant to stay between the living and the light. When the two men finally left Althera, they watched from orbit as the white clouds covered the planet again. Ji-won said softly, Do you think there are more dragons out there? Han-no smiled faintly. Maybe it's waiting for us to become worthy again. Years later, when the war ended across the colonies, stories began to spread. Stories of white shapes seen flying in distant skies, of voices in the snow that sounded like songs. People said they were myths, but for Han-no, they were a promise. Somewhere out there, the dragon still lived, in the wind, in the light, in the hearts of those who remembered what it meant to be human. And every time the wind howled on a cold night, Han-no would close his eyes and hear again that soft, deep roar that spoke not of war but of peace. From the center of the glow, a shape began to form, white mist curling into scales, wings, and eyes that burned like distant suns. The albino dwarf dragon stood before him again, reborn from light and ice. Its body shimmered like crystal under the cold air, and yet it felt alive, breathing softly as if it had never died. Han-no and Ji-won froze, unable to speak. The dragon lowered its head, and the wind around them became still. Han-no stepped closer, his heart pounding. You're alive, he whispered. The dragon's eyes moved, focusing on him. There was no sound, but somehow Han-no heard it inside his mind, a voice soft as a memory. Alive, because you remembered. The words echoed like the whisper of snow. Ji-won took a slow step forward, trembling. It's speaking, he said in disbelief. The dragon's wings unfolded slightly, glowing faintly. You saved what was left of your kind. You showed mercy when all others brought destruction. That is why I return. Han-no didn't understand how it could communicate, but he felt the meaning deep in his thoughts. He didn't feel fear anymore, only respect. Ji-won looked around the frozen valley. Why come back? The war is over. Everything is gone. The dragon's gaze turned toward the sky. The war never ends for those who forget. You fight machines, but the true battle is within you. Its voice faded like wind through glass. The snow around them shifted, and the air shimmered again with warmth. For a moment, Han-no thought he saw shapes, memories of the other dragons that had once lived there, soaring across the white world. Then the images faded, leaving silence. Han-no knelt, his glove touching the ice. You're not just a creature, he said. You're a guardian. The dragon's red eyes softened. Not a guardian. A reminder. It turned its head, looking at him and Ji-won as if measuring their hearts. Then its body began to glow brighter, pure white light spilling from its scales. Ji-won shielded his eyes. Captain, it's changing again. The light spread outward in a ring, melting the snow in a perfect circle around them. The ground beneath turned into smooth glass, reflecting the stars above. In the middle of it stood the dragon, its form slowly breaking apart into fragments of light. Your world will rise again, the voice said. Protect it better than you did this one. And then it was gone. Only silence remained. The snow stopped falling. The valley was warm now, peaceful, almost alive. Han-no stood for a long time, watching the space where the dragon had disappeared. Ji-won looked around, still shocked. Was that real? He asked. Han-no nodded slowly. Yes, more real than anything I've ever seen. They gathered the glowing shards left behind, pieces of the dragon's scale. When they returned to their small ship, the instruments glowed strangely, powered by an unknown energy. The ship lifted off without fuel, carried by the same light that had filled the valley. From above, they saw it. The pattern of light spreading to the snow like veins of silver, forming a great circle across the land. The dragon had left a mark, something eternal. Back at the orbital base, no one believed their story again. The shard were placed in research labs, where scientists studied them for weeks. They said it was a new form of crystalline energy, but no one could explain how it pulsed like a living heart. The report stayed secret, buried deep within files no one read. The soldiers returned to Earth, their mission labeled as completed. Hanno settled in a quiet town near the mountains. Sometimes, he hiked alone through the snow, watching the stars above. He didn't talk about what he'd seen, not even to G1. But at night, when the moonlight touched the snow, he thought he saw wings crossing the sky, white and silent. He smiled each time, feeling peace instead of fear. Years passed. The war faded into history, but Hanno never forgot the dragon's voice. He grew old, his hair turning silver, his hands marked with time. One winter, G1 visited him. They sat by the window, watching snow fall outside. "Do you still think it's out there?" G1 asked. Hanno nodded slowly. "Not out there," he said, touching his chest. "Here, it never left." When Hanno passed away many years later, a strange light appeared in the night sky above the town. It looked like a small star, glowing white and steady. The people called it the Guardian Star. No one knew its story, but they said it appeared whenever the world needed hope. Far away, on the frozen planet of Althera, the snow moved again. The same circle of glass where the dragon had vanished began to glow faintly under the storm. And deep within the ice, something stirred. Soft light spreading to the frozen layers like the first breath after a long sleep. The albino dwarf dragon opened its eyes once more.